Okay, so this session will be a really interesting one. So we'll be taking a look at how we can add state management to our React Native application. So if you are not familiar with state management, I have prepared a very simple example here that will help you understand why it's needed and why it's very important to so many web applications nowadays and to so many mobile applications nowadays. In our case, we'll be using React Native, and we will see later on how to integrate state management into our React Native application. Okay, so in this example, we have a scenario whereby I'm a tenant and I am seeking an apartment. Okay, and I can't just directly go into the apartment. There are some sequence of steps that I need to follow for me to be able to acquire the tenancy in a right manner, and the management also has to actually give me the go ahead and update on its side that I am the new occupant of that apartment. All right, the apartment is the store. Think of it as a container, okay, that has things inside it. And the things inside it can include who is the tenant of that house, what other features that house has. That is the store. Yeah, and these features or this tenancy, as we have seen, it can be modified, but before it's modified, there are a sequence of steps that need to be followed. One of those sequences is actions. Like, what are actions? Actions, think of them as an intent or an initiative to do something. And we have seen that I can make a phone call, I can receive a confirmation answer, I can send my information, I can receive also an agreement. Okay, so you realize that these actions, they have different names. All right, and by them having different names, that means that they have to be unique. The names of the actions, they have to be unique, so that whatever has to be dispatched is actually identified uniquely. Okay, then the actions, they are actually dispatched over, in this case, to the agents. So the agents, they actually have the capability of doing two things. They can either select something from their own end, like their state, or in this case, they can select from the state of their tenancy in their record keeping, and they can also update. Okay, so they can select and they can update, and the action of picking data from our state is called selecting, and we have selectors for that. All right, then to update the new tenancy, we actually use things that are called reducers. Reducers, they are actually what calculate the next tenancy in this case. So in this case, the agent will maybe key in some values. They'll be reducing the current state. All right, maybe it was state 1 and reduce it to state n. Okay, then after that, they'll get a response. All right, and then the response, they can actually even send it back, okay, to the user. So in that case, our new state will move from state 1 to state n. Yeah, the state that has been updated. Okay, so that's it. And then you realize there's something here called effects. Effects are things like side effects. For example, things that may be fetched from external sources like your database. But in React Native, because we are going to be using Redux, we will not actually be targeting effects directly. Yeah, rather we will be using a type of actions. They are called thanks, and we will see them as we continue. Effects are very specific to the likes of NGRX. So if you want to explore that more, like, feel free to explore it, or even if you want me to make something about that, like, let me know if you want like a tutorial on NGRX effects. So that's it. We have seen you cannot directly update the store, rather you update the state that the store should be in. Like, you are incrementing the version of the state. For example, you have version 1 of the state, and by default the state of the store at the start is version 0. Yeah, so it starts from version 0 all the way to version n. Okay, and there are ways of persisting this state. As we will see, we'll be using some methods that enable us to persist the state even during restarts of the application. All right, so I believe that's it. So the next thing, we'll be starting off the implementation and adding the state manager libraries that we'll be using. Okay, all right, okay, so far so good. I believe you now have an understanding of what state management is using the example we have just given. So how do we go about it? How do we add state management to our React application? We will need a couple of libraries. The first one is Redux.js Toolkit. Then we need React Redux. We need Redux Persist. We need React Native async storage / async storage. Then we also need Axios. These four are the ones we are going to use for our local storage and our state management. But we'll use Axios to make calls to the database, which is in the backend. So let's begin. The first thing we have to understand, the way we said actions, they have names. So I already created this file so that we can save time. And the first action name that we have is action name sign up. So you notice that I'm namespacing action name sign up. Then inside here, this is the most important part. The actions, they have to be differently named. You can't have two actions with the same name. That means if you have two actions with the same name, when you dispatch an action targeting that name, it will actually fail, or it can call both actions. It's just like you can't have two functions, function A, and then you have another function A. Yeah, it will not work, because when you call A, it will call both. Okay, and this actually it complains because they are like, if we save, it will complain because they have been duplicated. Think of it that way also, like the same way. But now you wonder, like, why did I use this pattern of naming our action names? Like, it's always best you say where the action is being dispatched from, then you go ahead and you say what has been done in that component. For example, it can also be from an action. You can dispatch an action from another action. Like in this case, like you can say, for example, data received from the backend. Then you say like the action, let's say like you can export a constant action XYZ is from maybe from the backend. So you can say like action user action is so dispatch this action response from backend. All right, and that should be it. Like nothing more, nothing less. Okay, so then when we get to the actions themselves, we see one important thing, like the name also appears here. So what is it like? What is it that defines an action? What is an action actually? We have two different types of actions. There are those that are asynchronous and there are those that are synchronous. In this case, the first action that we have for signing up is actually an asynchronous one. Okay, and they are normally called thanks. They actually cause side effects. They make calls to the backend, calls to APIs, and so forth. Okay, so what we'll be doing in this case is understanding what this code base is. First of all, you define the name of your action. Okay, then you create an asynchronous thank. Then you say what that action should listen to for it to be triggered. In this case, it should listen to the component, sign up component, sign up a user name action. Okay, then you have to pass in some parameters. The first parameter is what you are going to be sending when you dispatch this action. Okay, and you will see that. Then the other thing you are going to define is like the API. This will help you actually have access to the store and even do operations on the store, and even have access to the way it's called, like thank API. You can get access to things like dispatching action. In this case, we have a reject with value. Okay, and I'll explain this in a bit. So you notice that we have said, okay, this thing is an asynchronous one. Okay, then it means it needs to be marked as a sync. All right, and the reason for that is that we may need to wait for a response from the server before we do something with that data. And in this case, like for example, the server never always returns success. It may return an error or it may return a success. So in this case, if it returns a success, we will be proceeding with consuming the response. If it returns an error, we will reject it with a value. And this reject with value is what we have said. We have destructured it from the API, okay, that has been provided. Let's just have it as the API so that at least it's clear. So the other thing you notice is that we have to await the response that has been received. The other option would have been to actually just go with like thenables, like the thenables, like whereby we do this API posts and then we say then. Okay, but let's go with the async approach because that is more concise and that's more self-explanatory. Finally, the other thing on this file that you notice is a bit not normal, or like not the norm of object destructuring, is the way we have done it here. So we have data. The data we'll be getting from the backend. Then we rename it as a sign up response. Our server may return different things. It may return something or a property of the response as a UVW, XYZ, anything. But for us, we want to name it to be a sign up response. So I invite you to check a tutorial that is there for destructuring assignment. This is a really cool thing that will help you actually with your TypeScript or JavaScript development. All right. So that is it about the asynchronous actions. All right. So the next things that we are going to be talking about are the actions which are synchronous. All right. So the first one is here. Like, let's look at this. We have our user. Yeah, we have our user slice or our user state, because remember, the whole application is something that is really large. Yeah, it can have different states, it can have nesting, but for us, we want to focus on this specific slice. Think of it as a piece of the whole. All right, a piece of the whole in this case is a user state, which is actually in its own way unique. It only knows what it needs to know. It doesn't need to know what is outside it. It doesn't need to know other slices. It only needs to focus on managing its own state. So we will start by seeing like how to define this. So when we come here, we will see in the interfaces that we have said like our user should have a token. The users, they should have a token, and the token should be valid. And we also say that this slice, it should be called user slice, and we will see that in a few minutes. Okay, so when we come back here, we notice that the user token, we initialize the initial state of our application. The initial state for user token is empty, and then the token by default is not valid. Okay, so that means that when the user installs the application, they will always have this initialized for them, and that is why we are calling it initial state. So what is a user slice? A user slice, you get to use it, or you get to define it by simply calling the create slice method from Redux.js toolkit. And this, what it does, it gives you the option to actually decide the name of this slice, and we will see how this is really important, so that it can be identified to the global application state. All right, then it has another property called initial state. So the reason we just put it like this, I believe it's object, like by default if you put an object, then it will be extended from this one. So we would have actually done this like initial state, but it's repetition. Let's just have it like that. Okay, so the other thing you see are the reducers. Remember how we said the only way you can be able to manipulate the state of the application is using reducers. So in this case, we are creating our reducers, and then we are specifying what they actually do. And it seems a bit confusing, so to speak, but it should not be, because the reducers, they update the next state of the application by doing something, and this something, you remember the phone call we talked about, is an action, and that's why you see it as action. Yeah, so that's why like you find Redux toolkit is really like, what is it? It makes things so easy. It creates some of these things out of the box, because when we created the slice, it knows, okay, a slice will be packed with like reducer, it will be packed with actions, and that's why we have these reducers that can actually take the name of set user token, which is an action. So it's an action packed also as a reducer, so it's that concise. Okay, so you notice that we have also extra reducers. So what are these? Like, what are these? You notice that in some cases we don't necessarily have actions or reducers. Yeah, we don't necessarily have reducers that are definable in this section, and an example of that is this. For example, let's say we dispatch the action sign up. Okay, so when we dispatch this action for signing up, we have to update maybe the UI. We show like user is signing up, or even we show like a loader, or even we like maybe disable some inputs, or maybe even we update the state. Okay, so you see we defined this action here. All right, however, we can use it in the extra reducers, and that is where the builder comes in. So what the builder does is that it makes it so easy for us to access these actions that are not defined here, because that's why they are called extra reducers. And the reducers, like they actually target the state. So they will target the state based on an action that has been performed. So what is that? Like builder dot add case. This case is actually an action that has been performed, and the action in this case, for example, this is just an example. Let's say we want to say, like, when the user has clicked the sign up button and we have dispatched the action sign up, then you notice when we hit dot, you notice we are provided by a few things. First one is fulfilled, the other one is pending, the other one is rejected. So pending means this action has not yet finished, it's in the loading phase. All right, so you can say pending, then it will have a state, okay, and it will also have the other thing that will be packaged with it is simply the slice, it's simply the action that was dispatched, and the action, it may have data in it. All right, so when we save, we will have like the state and also the action. Okay, then you can use these ones here. You can also like do this state refers to this state, this one. Okay, so like as we said, the slice of the user, it will only be focused on managing itself. So we can say, like, when we do state dot, you notice we only have access to token is valid and user token, because they are extra reducers of this state slice. They only get to manage this state slice and nothing else. Okay, so let's just Control Z. I believe that is clear. So the other thing is that you can actually chain them. You can chain them. So for example, in this case, we can add another case. We say action sign up. When it's fulfilled, I want to do, like, for example, to say the user has signed up, or we show them a notification. Then another case, like, for example, action sign up dot failed, rejected. We will do like state and then action, and then we do another thing, and then that's it, nothing else. So we can just remove this, and I hope it was clear, so that we can go to the next step, right? Okay, so we have seen interfaces. They just define like maybe properties of your models and so forth. The other thing we have to understand is the selectors. There is nothing here, but remember how we said selectors, they actually pick data from the state or from the store. Yeah, they pick data from the store, and the store gives you the most recent version of the state that we have here. Okay, so the other thing that you are going to be talking about is the reducers configuration. So let's use this one actually. So the reducers configuration, what they do, okay, let's take a step back. Yeah, we take a step back and we go and we say, like, the flow that we had, like, for example, I make a call to the agency, and then the agency does this and this, and then after everything they can get to update my information on their end. All right, so what we'll be doing in this case is having a way of managing me as a user. That's why we call it user reducer. And when we go here, like, we have just explained this, that in the user slice we also have the reducers. All right, so the reducers, they are the ones charged with updating the next state of the application. Before the user had the token set, the token was empty and the token was invalid. However, they finally receive the token from the backend, and then the token that they received is now the one that we are going to be setting, and we are reducing the state to the next state. Like, we are reducing state 1 to the next state 2. So you can have so many states, like state 1 up to state n, and that is where the reducers come into play. But you may wonder why we use, like, what is this, like, what is happening here? You remember we said we will be using a couple of things: persisting our local storage, and then having a way to know if the user's token is valid. In a React application, what happens is that we don't have hold of the local storage, because that only applies to the web. Okay, so in this case we are going to be using persist reducer, and what persist reducer does is that it makes it so easy for us to decide the fields that we are going to persist in our local database of the phone. Okay, so in this case, all you need to do is you say user persist reducer. Like, you can name this as anything, but for me, I like namespacing them based on that specific reference. So in this case, a user persist reducer. Then we persist something, and that thing that we are persisting is a specific slice, this one here, the user slice. All right, then we say this is a storage we are going to be using, and that is why we installed async storage. Okay, and then what is whitelist, what is blacklist, and what is state reconciler? Whitelist, what it does, it gives you the chance to say, I want to only keep fields or properties. Let's go back here, the interface. Let's put it here. We say, like here, for example, I want to keep only the token. Okay, and the token's validity is not important. That's just an example. In other case, we may have a field that has so many, like maybe 100 records, and we don't want to persist it, so we can blacklist the fields that we don't want to persist. And that's it. So state reconciler decides how this resolution will be done, the data that has been received, how will it be combined with the existing data. You have a couple of options, for example, hard reset and others. Please go and check them out, because that is out of the scope of this tutorial. Finally, with this configuration, okay, we are going to apply the user reducer. Remember, what is user reducer? User reducer is a way for us to actually update the slice of our user state. Okay, so when we continue, we say, like, okay, we have done that. Now what? The next step is to come here all the way to the application store. Remember, the whole application, or rather the store, is actually a large slice. Think of it as the root slice here. That's the key thing, right? The root slice, right? So as a root slice, it also has reducers which manage it. It also has a need for persisting the reducer, yeah? And in this case, you notice it is so similar to the reducer config for the user, but the key difference is that the key here is the root. Okay, and then we have a storage. This is similar to what was there before, but this is the main change. And then we come and we say, all these reducers, okay, we want to combine them. So combined reducers takes all your applications reducers and has them in a common place, and then that should be it. So the next thing we are going to do, like, okay, so far our application, it doesn't have any knowledge of the existence of store, of the existence of maybe Redux. So how are we going to do that? Let's go all the way to our app.txt file. Let's open this. So here you see, like, we had this before, but now we need to wrap our application in provider. What is provider? It's coming from React Redux. Remember, we installed React Redux? That gives us, okay, it gives us this, and this one is an element or a component that wraps up our application and gives it the opportunity to listen and respond to the updates that are there in the store. I believe that's it. So to recap, all we have talked about, first of all, we installed the applications that we installed the libraries that we required. Then we went through all the terminologies that we talked about. We have now covered action names, actions, slice, selectors, reducer config, and then the store, and then this, and then this. All right. So the other thing you may say, okay, now what? Like, we have done all those things. Now what's the next step? Let's see. The next step is simply now testing the waters. Let's just dispatch the action, because you already created an action here for signing up a user. Let's just dispatch this action, and we pass in the data, and then we see where we'll get. But before that, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this, like, service. You notice that we placed the state manager. We said the state of our application should not be in any way tied to the presentation. So that's why we have the shared services placed here, right? And then in this case, like, let me just explain the code. We have Axios, okay? And with Axios, what it does is it's more of like a replacement of the fetch API. It gives you the ability to make calls, maybe external calls there. to different APIs. So this class, for example, you notice that is a static one. Why is it static? We don't need to instantiate it because we'll be using it in so many places. So we just go with a static approach. So in that case, if it was a class that needed instantiation, we will need to create an instance. Then when we create the instance, we needed now to access the properties. But in this case, we just say API shared dot post, and that's it. Okay, so what post accepts is the path. In this case, maybe for example, the sign up path, and the data, in this case, the user's form, and then it will return a promise, all right? Because it's not something that is going to be instantaneous. There may be latencies in the network, all right? So we have a return new promise. A promise, it can either be resolved, whereby this is a promise that has been accepted. It has returned successfully. The data is okay, and that there is no error from the backend, okay? Then the other option is that it can be rejected. So in these cases whereby the data is maybe a 404 is returned, a 500 is returned, another error from the backend has been returned, all right? So when we wrap this new promise, we wrap the Axios command, and actually in this case, because there is nothing more that we are doing here, we can just do this, that. Okay, so we have Axios returned, and then the post, and then sorry, I think we can do it like, let's do it this way. Yeah, let's do it this way. Let's keep it that way because we don't need to return anything from this. So we have post, and then this, what it does is that it calls the other static. And then the other thing, you cannot call non-static methods from static methods. That will fail, and it's not out within this scope, but let's just do like something real quick. Public non-static. So this is okay, but if we call it, we try and call it from a static method, it will fail. Like it will tell us like, no, that can't work. Yeah, property non-static does not exist. Don't type of this. It has to be an instance, because like as we said, you can't call non-static methods from static methods. So we will just remove this, and that was just a by the way. That's why I didn't dwell much on that. Then the other thing is, you notice that now we have the option to create the full endpoint, whereby we receive the sign up path. So we will be concatenating our localhost API, then we concatenate our sign up path, and this path can be anything. Okay, then this one we can actually, we will refactor this one later on, and we move it to in such a situation so that we can access the localhost path and the dev and the production path. Okay, so the other thing you notice finally is resolving or rejecting. We reject with error, we resolve with response. I think that is clear. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to do now is to go to the sign up. I believe it's sign up, and then I believe we left off at some point here. So at this point is whereby we just need to now start connecting and joining the dots, so that we can see how this goes. We will just do this for the sign up form, and then I believe the other part, which is the login part, I think you can try it out. Yeah, you can try it out and you can see how it works, and you can see how you can log in, but we will do that like later on. But for now, I just challenge you to go ahead and try it out. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to say we need to dispatch. Remember, you dispatch actions, so you use dispatch. Okay, so use dispatch is from React Redux, so you get to use the hook. Now this hook, what you need to do is simply this. You say dispatch, I want to dispatch something. Okay, and then something that I want to dispatch is action sign up. All right, remember, don't use action name sign up. Action sign up, which is the action that we are going to be dispatching. Then it has argument, and the argument is a payload that we need to be sending, which is this one. All right, and then why is it still complaining? It's complaining because we didn't specify the type here. Okay, and then this payload, it has to match the format of what is expecting. So what is sign up payload? Let's see. I believe it's here. Sign up payload, username, email, and password. Do we have username, email, and password? I believe it's full name. So let's change this one to be full name, email, and password. Yeah, so full name, email, and password. So we will dispatch this from our sign up component, and we should expect to see it here. So let's just test the waters in a few minutes. Actually, let's log in. Let's console log our sign up form here so that we can see it on this other side, right? Okay, so let's test this out. So we come to our application, and then we go to the sign up page, then we test this, and then mail then one, right? So expectations that our dispatch action should be executed. So here we will be dispatching this, then we will be seeing our form like logged and with the fields that we just provided, right? So but we should not be expecting anything like the backend should not be called, because like yes, it will be called, but there will be an error because it's not going to go all the way. Okay, so we console log the sign up response, but then we also console log the error part, right? So we save that, then we come here and we say let's sign up, yeah, unsupported protocol localhost. That's the error part, so that is good. And then we also have a sign up form that has Benson, Ben, and then that's it. So I believe that is clear. I believe everything is okay so far. So suffice to say, like our loop is closed, and let's see, the next part will now be to connect our backend. We connect the backend, we turn it, and then we see how to actually even call the localhost, or rather your development backend from React Native. And that is the next thing that you are going to be working on, right? Okay, so everything is okay and everything works. So now the next thing we are going to do is to now see how can we handle errors. Now we faced our first error. How can we display an error in a way that is nice, in a way that is presentable, right? So that's the next thing we are going to do. We are going to be working on a custom toaster in the next video. So like we see how actually to even connect to our backend, because now it's complaining, we're saying like unsupported protocol, and if there's unsupported protocol, that means how are we going to configure a protocol in the right way? And then finally after that we will now connect also our login, and then after that we see how this goes. So I believe you got to learn something in this tutorial, and the whole flow and the whole loops, how they connect. And if you have any questions, again, feel free to ask, and we can see where we get from there. Okay, also suggest maybe options, topics, and maybe bugs that you have. We are more than happy to work on them together, and we see how we solve them, right? So thank you, and until the next one. Okay.